Hi, I'm Millie. I am autistic as well as an ADHDer, and yeah, today I've got my mini ears on and my mini airlines pin and my oh mini mug for tea because we're talking about Disney World. Yay, Disney World accessibility, and specifically what they do for accessibility for people with cognitive issues like me. So, if you don't know, one of my most intense interests is I love Disney. I just really, especially love the theme parks, and I just generally love theme parks and roller coasters and all that. But to me, yeah, the Disney parks are just one of my favorite places in the world. I've been to Disneyland Paris, but never to Disney World. So it's my dream to go there one day. And yeah, as part of that, I was just doing some research into their accessibility policies because I know they have really thought about a lot of this stuff, more than any other parks I've looked at. So I'm not affiliated with Disney at all, but a lot of the information I'm going to talk about is coming pretty much direct from their own guides from the Disney website. And yeah, I just thought it was in video form. It'd help people who like me, like learning through them, watching videos. And I will, yeah, just relate some of the things they talk about, some of the tips to my own experience and add my own tips and that kind of thing. So I've been doing the research online, but I might get some things wrong or misinterpret some things. So if anybody notices anything that I got wrong or just has their own tips, I'd love to read other people's tips if you've been to Walt Disney World. And and yeah, you use the Disability Access Service or anything like that, or you just have general tips for living there with autism, yeah, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to read those. So I'll be specifically mostly discussing the Disability Access Service, DAS, and just other accommodations and accessibility tips. And this will be specifically just about Walt Disney World Resort in Florida. And I'll be specifically focusing on how they make things more accessible for people like me that have cognitive differences, basically. And if you want to skip to certain sections in the video, I'll have chapter markers down below. So as I said, I haven't been to Disney World yet, but if I do go, then I'll definitely make a video about that and compare the ideal. I'm just, excited now. Like, it seems like they have so many things thought out that would be helpful, but we'll see how the reality matches the actual experience. My experience with Disney in the past is they really, really try hard to make every guest have as good an experience as possible. So I hope it's the same for these disability policies. Their disability access stuff really makes me even more excited to go there because one of the big things they focus on when talking about cognitive related disabilities is this, or really with any disability, this inability, like difficulty with waiting in lines, which to me is one of the biggest barriers of visiting a theme park. It's one of my favorite things in the world, and I so badly want to go, but it's kind of this like overcoming that difficulty and the suffering of waiting in line. So as much as that can be reduced as possible, means I can enjoy the experience that much more. So the main program they have is called so it's DAS, I guess, but it's the Disability Access Service. And their statement on their website says, Disney parks have an unwavering commitment to providing a welcoming, inclusive environment and accessible experience for our guests. So that's kind of what they were saying before. They want that everybody to feel that magic and welcome and just have a good, safe, fun time. And the goal primarily is to help guests who have difficulty tolerating waiting in line because of the disability. So that's kind of what I was talking about before. So basically how this works is it doesn't let you skip the line. What it does is based on the estimated wait time. So if you go up to a ride or attraction and there's a line and say it says you have to wait 45 minutes, if I have this DAS set up, this disability access, then I can go up there and talk to a cast member. And for those who don't know, cast members are what they call the employees of the park, but the people working at the ride, and they will give me a return time that's based on the estimated wait time of the lineup. So if the estimated time to wait in line is 45 minutes, then my understanding is that I would get a return time that I could leave and then come back to the ride, and then I'd be able to go to the front of the line. But so it's kind of balancing it to be fair, kind of saying like, you don't get to go ahead of everybody and wait less time, but you don't have to wait in the actual lineup, because that's really what the difficult part is. So that makes sense to me. So it allows you to enjoy other parts of the park and just do what you need to do to take care of yourself, which is difficult to do when you're stuck in a lineup otherwise. So instead of waiting in the line, can go for food, look for shade, go to a bathroom, find a spot to chill, that kind of thing. The way they have it set up, so the DAS guest, so that would be me in this case, you can have a whole party that goes with the guest, but the person on the DAS program does not have to be present when requesting that return time at the rides, which can also be done at guest relations or at the attraction itself. So in that case, like anyone in the party, so I'd have a party that's registered as traveling with me, anybody can book those return times. Where the DAS guest, so where I would have to be present, is when redeeming the return time. So I'd get that return time, which somebody else in my party, like if I was feeling like I have to stay in the air conditioning or I have to rest, one of my amazing friends with me could go and get a return time for ride and then come back and we could continue just waiting. And then once that return time is up, and we're in that return window, then we could go to the ride altogether. And that's when I would have to be present, is when redeeming it. So when we're going to go ride, then I have to be there with my party, of course, which, that makes sense as well. And I also have to be present for when I register for the pass. And I'll talk about that a bit later too, but that's in person, can be done in person or by video call. So for traveling, of course, it makes sense. I'm in Canada, so what I'd want to do is set that up as a video call ahead of time to sign up for the pass, basically. And they are valid for 60 days. And I think this is a newer thing now, but the return times are can be booked with a cast member in person, like I was saying before, or it can be booked with the Disney app. It's called My Disney Experience. So that shows you wait times, and you can, I think, book restaurant reservations. You can do all kinds of stuff, and yeah, so you get your return time pass and everything right through the app. So that's just even more convenient now. So you don't have to physically walk across the huge park, right? And your party can stay together and everything like that. So as I was mentioned, the pre-registration, so before I'd be traveling, I would register, for me, I'd do it virtually, so a video chat with a cast member. And the earliest you can do that is 30 days before your visit. And the latest, it has to be at least 2 days before you visit. And another cool new thing they have is this DAS advanced planning. And so that means rather than having to book those return windows at the rides on the day of, have a little less scrambling, you can actually book 2 1-hour return windows for select attractions, it says. So I'm not sure exactly what the list of those attractions are, but at least allows you to pre-plan, get some things booked. And I'm assuming that's 2 1-hour return windows per day is my assumption. And yeah, of course, you can still book additional DAS rides on the day of. But that just gets ahead of it, so you have less, just anything that's more advanced planning and less scrambling on the day makes things more accessible for me too, especially in terms of anxiety and that kind of thing. So DAS is basically just a 3-step process. Like I was saying before, you register, which is before arrival at the park or at the park at guest relations. And step 2 is requesting your return times for your ride. And step 3 is enjoy the park and explore until it's your time to ride the fun ride. So they have multiple great guides for just general disability guides. And then they're actually specifically set out to, like there's specific things they have for mobility, that kind of thing. But I'll talk about the cognitive disabilities guide, they call it, I believe. I'll have links for all these guides in the description, by the way. And yeah, this one, it even specifically mentions autism, so it's focusing on autism or other cognitive differences. So I love that they're specifically thinking of autism, that just makes me feel safer going to a place, like knowing that they've thought of these things ahead of time. I'll have to do less explaining because they'll hopefully be trained on all the things that I might bring up as needing or would be issues, that kind of thing. And so in this guide, it has a lot of tips. It talks about purchasing tickets in advance, so avoiding having to start a day with a long, hot, Florida, stressful wait in line surrounded by thousands of people in the like main entrance ticket line. So having tickets ahead of time, don't have to worry about if they're going to be sold out, that kind of thing, which is a possibility. The guide talks about the rider switch feature. So you have to be a party with more than 2 guests. This is good for disabilities or anything, like for kids as well. If somebody's too young to ride, basically the way that works is one person waits on the platform while the other 2 ride. And then, so one person's waiting, 2 people go on the ride, and then the one person from your party waits on the platform. And then when the ride comes around back to the beginning, you switch. So again, one of the other people is waiting, like say it's like parents, and the second parent, they wait. And then the other 2 ride again. So if you have a party with 3 or more, it's just useful if one person can't ride or they get to the front of the line and decide they can't ride because they're overwhelmed, or, that could apply to me if I was just got to the front and I was just having a shutdown or even a meltdown or something, or I just decided I wasn't up for it in the moment, or anybody who's, gets overwhelmed by the noise or realizes some part of the ride is too scary for them or something. So that's a really good option that they do. It saves you from having to just, having gone all the way through the line to the front and then having your entire party leave because one person can't ride, then at least some of the people get to ride. And then, you know, it's less of a disappointment then. Of course, if you're friends or family, you're going to understand. But at least this way, then some of the people can ride without having to completely leave the line and come back. So I think that's a really useful one. In the guide, they talk about break areas. They're officially designated areas that are just the quietest parts of the park. So you don't have to wonder and again scramble, like, where can I go? Like in the heat of the moment when, you know, if I'm overwhelmed or, you know, you're supporting somebody and they're overwhelmed and they're maybe panicking or something, then you don't have to be like, oh my gosh, I don't know, this park is huge. There's so many people. Where can we go where it's quieter? Yeah, they've just thought of and listed specific places that are designated as like quieter break areas. And they're listed in that guide, so I'll show that. But also, if you don't have the guide or you forget, you can just ask any cast member where the break areas are, and they will tell you where they are. So, for example, a couple I was reading about is the first aid location in each of the 4 parks is a designated break area, but there's multiple break areas for each park. They also have companion restrooms, so they're larger and designed for if somebody needs assistance in the bathroom. And I just like in the guide they have a little thing like warning about there's automatic flushers and how those can surprise. Yeah, like honestly, those I really don't like those either. I'm like just always anticipating it, and that kind of like loud, that specific kind of noise really does elevate my anxiety a lot. So I appreciate they put a little warning for that kind of thing. They talk about the parks offering dietary accommodations as well, which is cool. So they mentioned food allergies and intolerances, of course, and those accommodations can be made ahead of time when booking the restaurant reservations. So generally people booking the Disney restaurants book really ahead of time anyways. Ends up being important because they fill up pretty quick. But it still can be done at the restaurant if you think of something with the chef or the restaurant manager, they're saying. And guests who have allergies, intolerances. So this applies very much to autism as well. Like I have very restricted food and what I can eat, and it really depends on the day too. I go through phases with my food and stuff. So it gives me or somebody else who has this issue are allowed to bring food into the park, which you're normally not allowed to, but it says just inform a cast member when entering the park that the guest has this issue and needs to bring food in. So they also have separate smaller guides, which are basically maps. They're called guides for guests with disabilities. So a little more general, but it's cool because it has the map of the park, but then all the disability. So I think it's like the normal park map, but this just has specifically all the disability information on it as well. So it's really nice that they have those as well. And they have paper copies of guest relations, or of course, these are all available as PDFs for download, which I will link to as well. So some more things they mentioned is helpful, I really related to as well. And the Cognitive Disabilities Guide is planning ahead for one thing, which you're doing if you're watching this video maybe. And reading all these guides that I linked. And just plan. If you haven't been to a theme park, or especially Disney park, it's like a very busy, very overwhelming place, especially for somebody with sensory processing issues, autism, that kind of thing. And so it's just plan for that ahead of time for that sensory environment. So it can be things like sudden loud sounds. There's a lot of motion. Like I get affected a lot by the visual sensory environment where there's a lot of just visual complexity and movement and stuff. And lots of bright lights, colors, moving people and objects, lots of people talking loud, lots of people in general. Is Florida we're talking about, so extremely hot can be, or it is most of the time, and very, very humid, and things like sudden rain showers and thunderstorms. So if somebody's afraid of thunder, that kind of loud noise, that kind of thing, that's something to be aware of. And yeah, just be ready for the rain. I really can't stand being wet, for instance, but it's hot. Like I want to go on water rides, but I have to really be careful that I manage to stay dry. So like ponchos, that kind of thing. Change of socks, I've heard, is really critical for doing a long day in Florida, that kind of thing. Yeah, stuff like planning a visual schedule. So I think that's a great idea. That could include things what to expect in terms of sensory and crowds. And there's an example visual schedule in this cognitive disability guide. So that's a great starting point, has with photos and everything. I think watching videos is a great idea. There's official video tours for each of the parks on the Disney website. And I personally I just every day watch theme park reviews, and I'll probably link some of my favorite channels. I like watching the ride reviews. I think it's really important, like, if somebody's nervous about a ride, like, they don't care about spoilers, they're just worried about, like, that's how I get too. I'm like, I want to know if there's going to be drops or darkness, or if there's going to be scents and stuff, and I'm going to be sprayed. And I'll talk about this later, but they have an entire guide that shows you each attraction and what the sensory things are. So that really helps. But yeah, for videos, just watching ride POVs where somebody's taken a camera on the ride, I think that really helps my anxiety before going on a ride. So that could be something you show somebody, is like, here's the entire experience of the ride, so you just know what to expect. Like, to me, relate to being like PDA part of autism, which means in this case that I just need as much information as possible about an activity to feel less anxious about it. So that really helps. Other things they suggest are studying the maps for each of the parks. And as I mentioned before, they have those disability maps, which are super helpful. And choosing a meeting location in case you get split up. So, and the person who has the disability could talk to them, if they're not able to figure this out themselves. But just have a plan of, if you get separated, talk to a cast member, and then they can take you to a designated kind of lost person spot, and just have the whole party agree where they would go look for a person beforehand. And what I'm working on is having communication cards as well. I have some, but I specifically have a card. If I'm to the point of shutdown where I can't talk at all, has something that explains that I'm autistic, I have communication issues, sensory issues, like what's helpful for interacting with me and what's not. I want to make a whole separate video about those in the future, about what could be on one of those cards. But yeah, having some of those things ahead of time, if I'm feeling overwhelmed or the person is and it's an emergency, just to be able to show somebody something and not have to explain, especially if you can't talk, right? Then that can really save the situation. And they recommend practicing waiting in line. I think that's a good idea. Who's not used to, like, just really, I appreciate just like having my expectations managed. Like, I'd want somebody to not like sugarcoat how much. Of course, with the disability pass, you're going to mitigate waiting in line, but I almost want to know, I want to prepare for the worst case scenario, that like lines might be over an hour long in some cases, and you might be out in the heat and that kind of thing. So try to avoid as much as possible, but plan for the worst, of course. Some of the suggestions of what they talk about, for things to bring that relate to autism and things like that is, it talks about a name tag, and like I said, communication cards were an idea I have, so I would definitely do the communication cards thing. And huge one for sure. I don't go anywhere without my noise canceling headphones. And then I would specifically have my big noise canceling headphones. And then if I need to put them, I'd have to put them away to ride on a ride. If I have to put them in a locker for a while, I'd want foam earplugs as backup because I can't always have the noise canceling headphones on if I'm going to ride a ride. And maybe there'll be like 10 or 15 minutes before preparing of going on a ride where I'll have to put something in a locker, that kind of thing. So keep that in mind. Like, if you have somebody distracted with like an iPad or something, like that helps them regulate, or, or yeah, noise canceling headphones might not have them in the short time leading up to the ride. So I would bring like a foam earplugs as backup. And yeah, as I was saying, like a device or activity. So phone, tablet, and sensory toys, stim toys. So yeah, I would bring all my trusty, like my favorite things. I love these small things like this I can put on a lanyard. This little poppy guy. And I always have these everywhere I go. These tangles, they're great. Just little small things. So the last guide I want to talk about, which is super cool, it's just the attraction details. It's basically a sensory guide. It's really well designed. I think it's really an accessible design. I'll link that again. I'll show a bit of it. It's really easy to find the info. Everything's color coded. It's just basically a table that shows every attraction sectioned out by park. And then across the top, it just shows different sensory experiences. And wherever's a dot means that there's going to be expect that sensory experience on that ride. So even for people without disabilities, if you're just like, don't like sudden drops, or you don't like darkness, you don't like water being sprayed at you, you can still get use out of this guide and help that to plan in advance which rides you're going to ride and which rides you're not, so you don't have an unpleasant surprise at the time. So the categories they talk about are scents and smells, and these are specifically like sometimes they'll have artificially induced scents to enhance the experience. Like I was on a ride once where it was at a different park, but it was a ratatouille ride, and they had like the smells of, it was like a bakery, and then the smells of baking and like vanilla and stuff like that, which I didn't know at the time, and I actually found it very like cloying and sweet and overpowering, and I didn't enjoy that. But anyways, yeah, it's just good to know ahead of time. Lighting effects, so there's a lot of that, like flashing lights, bright animated scenes, that kind of thing. Loud noises, so things making like popping or whooshing noise, that kind of thing. And it talks about specifically what these things are in the ride. So it is very specific about what they are. And then some are more general, just like periods of darkness, right? So low light portions or portions with total darkness. Bumpy is rides that have sudden movement related to the attraction, like simulated, like going over rough terrain. And ones that are fast, like sudden acceleration or just moving fast. Ones that are wet, where you might get sprayed. And elements of surprise. So ones in the queue, actually, too, keep that in mind, because the queues are amazing in themselves and heavily themed. So, things that might have a loud noise or something pops out at you. That's just meant to surprise you. And then also the trip time, which actually includes the load and unload time, but just not the wait time for the attraction. So that can help with planning too, see the overall time each ride takes to do. And an example of how they describe the elements of surprise, I like that they're very specific. So like a certain kind of surprising element might be fine for some people, but then another one won't be. So an example for Pirates of the Caribbean is, it says, one drop in darkness, splashing water. So that gives you a couple different things that are going to happen. And that guide also lists the type of restraint. So relating to kind of claustrophobia or people have issues getting into certain rides. It talks about like some have no restraints, it's just a seat. Some have lap bars, some have lap belts, that kind of thing. So it talks about that. And yeah, so those are the guides. So I love that they're thinking about these kind of things. And especially the thing with lines, like I want to talk about some of my issues with lines is like, first of all, that's really one of my biggest barriers to going to a park, other than the general overwhelm of the park. But something about the line is like being trapped in a worst case scenario environment where you're given this reward at the end, but you have this increasing horror as I go through the line. And so stuff like that for me in the line is the overwhelm of the visual of too many people and too many things and movement, everybody speaking and the loud, and I have trouble filtering the noise. So it just becomes like cacophonous and completely overwhelming. And I have real difficulty, like dysautonomia, which means my autonomic nervous system, my body functions not the best, I guess. But so for like Florida heat, I would have to worry about my body just doesn't regulate body temperature as well. And also, I don't notice things like thirst very easily, or if I have to go to the bathroom, stuff like that. So it just makes it where I'm suddenly in line and I'm just like, don't realize I'm dehydrated, I'm overwhelmed by sound. I have to suddenly go to the bathroom and I didn't have much warning, that kind of thing. And I have physical pain too. I have scoliosis, I have back issues. I'm usually okay with the physical pain when I'm walking, as long as I'm moving. But with a lot of stand and stop, like being in line, like standing itself is the most painful to me. And yeah, then these things, if it gets too much, it can lead to a meltdown, a shutdown. And then that could be like, it could be done for the day and it would ruin the rest of the day. And if I have a meltdown, it takes days to recover from that kind of thing. And even if I don't get to that point, staying in line just depletes my energy that much quicker and means I just can't enjoy the park the same way other people would or ride as many rides as I want to, that kind of thing. So yeah, I hope that helped anyone who's planning a trip to Walt Disney World or is just curious about this kind of thing. If you're autistic yourself, or if you're supporting something, if you're going with somebody and helping them out, thank you for being a good friend or family member. I appreciate that. If and when I go, like I'll need help going there. So I really appreciate anybody who can go with me. And yeah, anybody, not just autism, but anybody, it's meant for anybody who has barriers to standing in line. And if you're able to support this channel, I have a link to a place where you can support me financially. I only have disability income and I honestly lose money on this channel. So any support you could have helps, but I also appreciate you watching. That helps as well. And if you want to see more videos about autism and neurodiversity, that's what I do on this channel. So please like and subscribe. That helps. And subscribing helps you see more of these channels in the future. And yes, thank you so much for watching. Bye.